was in the 4th grade, I went to this camp called Cedar Canyon. And at this camp, every year we would do this competition between cabins where you would get these points for cleaning up certain things or winning games. But most importantly, you'd get points for how many verses you could memorize. And so the longer the verse, the more points you would get. And so I'm a little bit of a competitive person. And so when I found this out, I was like, okay, I have to find the longest verse and I'm going to memorize it and I'm going to get all of these points for my team. And so I memorized this verse. It's Matthew 22:37 through 40, which says, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest command, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. All of the laws and all of the writings of the prophets depend on these 2 commands." Now, I know that's not like a super long verse, but when you're in 4th grade, you're kind of like, man, this is like memorizing an entire book. Like, that's how it felt. And so I took about 3 days to memorize this entire verse. And at the end of it, I got it. And I don't like to brag on myself, but I'm pretty sure I was the only one at that camp who did memorize that verse. But for some reason, I don't remember if my cabin won that year. I don't remember really anything else about that camp, but that verse stuck with me to this day. I've had that memorized ever since then, because as a 4th grader, I could have had no idea how impactful that verse would be on my life. I had no idea the fact that that would become the verse that I would base my entire life around. When I was a junior in high school, I had a new youth pastor come into my life. His name was Michael Christian. And when he came in, he named our youth ministry Light Student Ministries. And on every single shirt that we have, it said, "Love God, love people." That'd be the same youth ministry that I would go on to intern for 2 years after I graduated. Because all of this time, the Lord had that verse marked in my heart, and it just continued to get deeper and deeper in, to the point where everything in my life that I do, I want to make sure that I am loving God and that I'm loving those around me. And so the other day when I was on TikTok, I came across this video where it said, "What is something in the church that frustrates you?" And I started thinking, and I was like, I knew that there was something on my mind that I just couldn't fully grasp. And so I spent some time and I was mulling it over and I was mulling it over, and I started to realize that one of my biggest frustrations is that as a church in America, we don't always live this out very well, because we spend so much of our time defending why we aren't living into those 2 commands. We use so much time using other scriptures, other things that Jesus said to justify, well, I'm not loving this person because they break this commandment. I'm not loving this person because they agree with this politician, which is obviously against Jesus. But Jesus broke it down into 2 simple things: to love God and to love people first. As I got older and as I got into high school, I started to understand the background behind that verse. The background is the Pharisees were actually asking Jesus all of these questions to try and trip him up, to try and get him to mess something up, to prove that he was not the Son of God. And so when it came to this question, it was somebody who knew the law very well, and so he was trying to trick Jesus by asking him, what is the most important commandment? And so obviously they were thinking of the 10 commandments, but Jesus came back and said, none of those are the most important. The most important is to love God, and the second is very close, to love others. But yet we do what the Pharisees did all the time, if we try and find which is the more important law, which is the most important thing, when Jesus made it so simple. He said to love him and to love others. 65% of Americans would say that they identify as being a Christian. And if you look at America, the last word that I would say to describe America is love. And so what does this mean? I don't want this to be a condemning thing. I want it to be a recognition that we have to change the culture. If we want to see revival in America like we all pray for, if we want to see transformation come to the people in America, we have to change something. And so my question to you is, how do we change culture? How do we change the American culture where it says, if you disagree with me, then you can't love me. If you do this, then you can't love me. If you do this, then you can't follow Jesus. How do we change that culture? And while there's many things that I think would fall into that category, I just want to go over 2 that I think are the most important in my life that I try to make sure I do every single day. And the first one is we have to look at the golden people over their sin. I think today we have such a bad habit of whenever we look at somebody, and I'm just as guilty of this as anybody, is that we look at them and we immediately see what's wrong with them. We look at them and we see, oh, you're a porn addict. Oh, you've had sex outside of marriage. Oh, you've done these things. But in every scripture that Jesus has in the Bible, when he's interacting with somebody who's considered the lowest of the low, he is not the one who initially talks about their sin. It is always brought up by somebody else. For instance, the woman at the well, whenever he meets her, Jesus does not bring up her sin. She brings it up and then he addresses it. But so often we are the people to point out their flaws. And I truly believe that one of the reasons we see so many people in America leaving the church is because we expect people to look like Jesus before we actually introduce them to him. We expect them to do all of these things, to look all of these certain ways, to live a life that we live by our convictions, by everything else. But we don't actually do the thing of introducing them to the one who made us look like that. I've been in so many instances where I literally was in a conversation a couple of weeks ago with two people who I know love God more than anything in the world. And one of the people said this phrase to the other one. I was just standing by in this because I don't always love conflict. But what she said to her is, she said, I don't understand how you can love Jesus and believe that. The thing is that even if somebody doesn't love Jesus, it's not our job to point it out. It's our job to show them what love actually looks like. God called us to love and not to judge, because you will never, ever change somebody's mind by getting in an argument with them. We do not change people. We have no way to change people. Jesus changes people. And the only way that we will see that happen is if we begin to love people more than we love an argument, which brings me to the second thing that I believe we have to start doing as an American culture in order to really show the love of Jesus, is that we have to start valuing a relationship over being right. I have two siblings. I'm very close with both of them, and my brother and I are very, very similar people, which means that we get in arguments pretty consistently. We butt heads all of the time. And the thing is that anytime we're in an argument, it doesn't matter how well either one of us argues, we are not changing the other person's mind. I will argue with him until the day I die about something, because we are both stubborn and we both do not want to admit that we were wrong. We will never, even if halfway through an argument I recognize that I was wrong, I'm never going to admit that to him. I'm never going to tell him, hey, I actually think you were right on that. No, I will go to my grave defending that I was right. There was a reason my parents wanted me to be a lawyer when I was a kid, is because I am very good at arguing, and actually really my whole family is. But the thing is that we've never changed each other's minds on topics. Even if we do a little bit, we would never admit it. And the same thing goes for the entire American culture, is that when you get into an argument with someone, you're not going to change their mind. You change people's minds by showing them love. I would say my brother and sister are my two biggest influences in my life outside of my parents. And the way that they've influenced my life hasn't been by telling me that I did something wrong, hasn't been by arguing with me about how I'm living my life. It's been by coming to me in love and saying, hey, I love you, and I just want you to know that I want more for you in this. I want more for you than this relationship that you're in. I want more for you than whatever I was doing in my life. And that is what changed, was when they came in with love and not with arguing. Whenever my brother was in 8th grade, he came to me. I have permission for him to tell this. He came to me and he let me know that he was struggling with an addiction to porn. He was introduced to it in the 2nd grade. And I was a sophomore in high school, and at the time, I had no idea what to do with this, because I saw the sin. I couldn't see him anymore, so I was trying to fix the sin, and I wasn't actually loving him. Flash forward a couple of years, he was about to graduate high school, and he came to me again with a separate problem and was telling me all these things, and he was obviously very traumatized and was just trying to get past this. And in this moment, the Lord just said, I need you to just let him know how much you still love him. And in that moment, I said, Austin, I don't care about all of these things. I don't care about what you've done. I don't care about anything or how you see yourself. I want you to know that none of those things matter. You could tell me anything right now, and that's never going to change the way that I feel about you. And that is what led him to start changing his life. Not specifically that moment, but had I come in and said, well, Austin, I hope you know that you've been sinning. The Lord's probably pretty mad at you right now. That never would have changed anything, because what he didn't need right then, he didn't need me to come in and fix his problem. He didn't need me to come in and tell him he was wrong. He needed a sister's love. And what so many people in America need right now is the Father's love. They don't need us to come in and tell them that they're doing their life wrong. They don't need us to come in and tell them it's a sin. They need a Father's love. I was a youth intern for a couple of years, and I would have all of these moments where students would come to me for advice, and I'd be like, yes, finally I can impart my wisdom of what I went through. I'm sure if you're a parent, you can understand this. And I would give them this advice, and they wouldn't follow it. They would basically do the opposite. I would be like, you definitely shouldn't date that boy because I know what he wants, and they would go and date him anyways. And that was some of the most frustrating times of my life, because I was like, why aren't you just listening to me? I know I've been through it. I've been there, which, knowing myself as a teenager, I wouldn't have listened either. But then they would come back to me and they'd be like, hey, this boy broke my heart. This girl broke my heart. Hey, I crossed the line that I shouldn't have. I did all of these things. And in that moment, everything inside of me wanted to be like, I told you that's how it was going to happen. I was right, you were wrong. I told you this was going to happen. But in the moment, that's the last thing that they would have needed. What they needed was their intern to just love them. To just say, hey, I know he broke your heart and I'm so sorry, but I promise you that there's going to be somebody someday who doesn't break your heart. What they needed was the love of the Father, not the judgment of my college self. And so my challenge to you is to think of that one person who just really grinds your gears. You know, that one person when they kind of start talking that you're like, oh man, could you just not talk? I want you to think of that one person. And for the next 7 days, I want you to just pray, God, would you help me to see the gold in them? Not to see what I think of immediately, but would you help me to see what you have called them, what you have put in their life? God, help me to see what you have said about them. And at the end of the 7 days, I want you to just look at how you feel about that person. If you interact with them, see how those interactions have changed, because I can guarantee that when you change even just your mindset about a person, it can change your entire relationship with them. Because I truly, truly believe that if we want to see transformation in America, it has to start with love. I don't believe that it's going to come through signs and wonders or having the best preachers. It's coming from the body, coming back to love, because revival will come with love. Thanks.